right, welcome back to Look Both Ways with David and Wes. Pointless and psychotic conversations about all things transportation. No, pragmatic conversations about all things transportation. So I am Wes Marshall, professor of civil engineering, University of Colorado, Denver, here in Denver, Colorado. With me again is...
I am David Zipper in the gloomy, gray, chilly city of Washington, D.C. I am a senior fellow at the MIT Mobility Initiative and a frequent writer on various transportation topics.
And we are live again. So the last couple episodes have been pre-recorded, so we're live on YouTube. So if you're listening to us after the fact, a lot of times we do it this way, so feel free to join us. It's always fun to have folks in that room. The other thing to note is this is our 10th episode, which it doesn't seem like a lot, but when I looked it up, it seems like only about 5% of podcasts even make it this far.
That's right. That's what actually a friend of mine who does some podcast work for a living told me. He was like, honestly, if you and Wes can make it to episode 10, you've already sort of crushed it. And even better, I think based on the interwebs, it seems like we're actually getting more and more listeners each time. So it's amazing. I don't know if this means we should get something fancy to drink when we make it to rail drinks at the end. Did you get a special beverage this time?
I did not. The definition of rail drinks is not particularly special drinks.
You know what? As embarrassing as to admit that, I never actually thought about that, but you're right. We should be having really basic, non-name brand alcohol.
Like Kirkland brand, which I had last week.
Yeah, that was amazing. Honestly, I still can't believe you uncovered that. But
all right, so
but we'll get there.
Before we get started, I had a question for you because I know you've been traveling a lot, as have I. So my question, and I think I have a sense of what you do on this, but I'm curious if you are intentional about this. So when you visit a new city and you want to learn about the city, its transportation system, and whatnot, what's your go-to move for doing so?
My go-to move. I'm going to answer this in two ways. I'm going to give you the most obvious answer, which is to just walk a ton. I think I clocked 16 miles one day in Tokyo. I was just in Barcelona. I hit 12. And I actually do that even more than taking transit because I feel like when you walk, you can actually see the architecture change. You can see neighborhoods evolve. So I just sort of expect my feet to be extremely sore. The other thing I do, though, which is I'm going to be honest with you. Again, I do this every now and then when you ask me these questions, which by the way, for anyone who's listening, Wes does not tell me what he's going to ask beforehand. So I sometimes, as in today, I'm like, should I say this? I'll just say it.
Just say it.
But sometimes I'm going to a new place. It's the advantage of having the podcast and a newsletter and some followers on social media. I will somewhat strategically mention, hey, I'm going to Bergen, Norway. I'm excited to see it, which is an example a couple of years ago. And in that instance, a guy I'd never met before reached out, said, hey, I live here. I'd love to show you around. He turned out to be the nicest guy. He met me at this amazing bike tunnel and showed me how to bike through it and guided me through Bergen. And it was amazing. And honestly, again, back to Barcelona, I mentioned I was going out there and I met not one, but two people who live there and offered to show me around some. So, you don't get a lot of upside from having a presence on social media. I know you, Wes, are not even on LinkedIn. I think I dragged you forcibly into Blue Sky, but this is one of the advantages that I've found, to tell you the truth.
That is interesting. Yeah, because I generally don't do that. I don't reach out to people before I get to a place in order to explore. I mean, I usually start kind of my test of a city at the airport just to see if I can get to where I'm going without using a car or Uber and Lyft, to see if there's a train or something like that.
Sure.
And some cities are way better than others. Like you come to DC and I come into National, it's super easy, barely an inconvenience to get to downtown on the metro. You go other places, it's much more difficult. The other thing I do, this is maybe a little weird. This is more me. I look for kind of hole in the wall type restaurants that I want to go to, either through Reddit or through, TV shows, like the old versions of Man vs. Food, the first two restaurants I used to go to were always great for this. And I try to get there, again, without using a car, try to kind of test the city out, but you're going to, not the kind of restaurants that are often right downtown, but going to different parts of the city. And, some cities, I remember in Salt Lake, I had to walk a few miles to get to where I wanted to go. Other cities, it's great. So that's kind of what I try to do. I kind of have a list of those kind of places I want to hit. Sometimes I drag somebody along for the ride. Other times it's just me out there, like walking, biking, or trying to take the bus or
Yeah.
transit.
No, I think you and I both travel for work on our own sometimes. So
Yeah.
you have to have some sort of a plan for how you amuse yourself when you don't have a spouse or a friend in tow. I mean, one other thing, I mean, I do enjoy sometimes being a bit of a tourist. I will give a little shout out to a website I have no affiliation with. I just think is great. You ever use Atlas Obscura?
Yeah.
Do you know that?
Yeah.
You do?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's sort of a website of sort of slightly off the wall or different kinds of tourist sites in a city, like not the standard ones, and can find. I'm trying to think of some of the more obscure things. I think I found in Paris the remnants of the original guillotine, and near the Bastille once. It's in the middle of a street in Paris. It's just standing there, and cars are going over it. And I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of cool. Atlas Obscura, I like it.
It is cool to end. I mean, yes, part of what I'm doing is trying to, look at the journey along the way, but to get to a destination, whether it's a guillotine or a nice sandwich, it's kind of nice to have something at the end.
No, totally. Absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. I can absolutely appreciate it. One thing I actually wish was easier. I'm actually writing a story about this, is to use local bike share in some of these places when I arrive. It turns out when I was in Barcelona, back to Barcelona, you literally can't. I think I mentioned this maybe in the previous episode, Barcelona bans locals from doing it. So if you've got a friend who can loan you a bike, it's great. Or if you can figure out how to, I guess you can always go to a bike shop and rent a bike. But I have to admit, especially in the US, I sometimes scratch my head a bit why as I'm a Capital Bike Share member here in DC, why can't I, have transferable privileges when I travel to New York or San Francisco or Boston or Chicago, and all of those cities are also managed by Lyft. So anyway, ongoing annoyance.
Just to clarify, David meant the locals aren't banned from the bike share. It's the opposite. So the locals.
Oh, did I get it wrong? Sorry, I flipped it. Yeah, I meant exactly the opposite. Yeah. Locals are the only ones who can use bike share in Barcelona. I, as a foreigner, literally am completely banned from doing so. So thank you for that.
Maybe big car rental is trying to push that law. I mean, I don't know why they would do that. It doesn't really make a ton of sense because you think they'd want people on bikes.
Well, I actually have a story coming out to explore exactly that question. It will be out in just a few days in Bloomberg City Lab, because I agree with you. It's weird. I thought it was weird, but I've learned something about it. So maybe we can come back to it in a future episode.
Yeah, I can't wait. All right. So next thing on the list is word on the street. So why don't you start with that?
Sure. So Wes and I actually had another topic in mind, but we dumped it because late last week, big news seemed to break, which is that the Trump administration wants to, or the White House wants to completely eliminate federal financial support for public transportation. As I think a lot of listeners are going to know, historically, there's been an agreement where the Highway Trust Fund is sort of split between, a given amount of resources or revenues coming from the gas tax go to highways, and then a much smaller chunk goes toward transit through a formula. Trump wants to end that. And he also wants to make it impossible for states to flex some of their highway money to transit, which is something that a number of states have done with upwards of 5% of their federal highway dollars, and it's been totally legal. States including Maryland and Hawaii have done that. Some of you may remember that this ended up being the strategy or the tactic that Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania used a year ago to stave off some sort of draconian cuts at SEPTA, the Philadelphia transit system. And the White House for Trump wants to basically make that impossible. So that was the big news last Friday. A lot of people in transit world were very, very worried. A lot of just regular people were very, very worried, I think. But it seems, and this is hot off the press news, we're recording this on November 20th. It seems, based on new news, that that plan by Trump may be dead on arrival, because to basically create those sorts of policies, Trump would need to get them to be part of the new surface transportation reauthorization bill, which will come from the House. And the head of the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee is a guy named Sam Graves. I believe he's from Missouri. And he was quoted as saying he is just not at all interested, quote unquote, in that move, because he wants to see a bipartisan bill, which I think he understands correctly means there needs to be some transit support within it. So it may not be happening. It's likely not happening anytime very soon. But I think this move really scared a lot of people who support transit, because without those federal dollars, it'd be an entirely new ballgame, especially for capital projects, since that's where federal money really is used. Wes, your thoughts?
So, I mean, do you even know when and where this dates back to, when we started using the Highway Trust Fund for transit?
Do I even know?
Yeah.
You sound kind of accusatory there. I used to. Wasn't it
Yeah.
like was it the 70s?
Right,
I'm
and
trying to remember the exact date.
Yeah, no,
60s or 70s?
late 60s. I mean, I only know because it's Massachusetts. So, I mean, they were trying to build the inner loop, which never
Yeah.
got built.
Yeah.
It was one of the first kind of big freeway revolts and protests against building a highway. And Massachusetts was able to kind of broker through a law that allowed the Highway Trust Fund money to go towards transit. So it's been happening. I think this is probably 69 or so. But it's interesting too. I mean, I think part of the problem here is the fact that we even call it the Highway Trust Fund. Like that name sort of implies that it's only for highways. I mean, I would guess, like, just even if you look at the gas tax, I would guess that less than half of the money going towards the gas tax is actually on interstates. It's probably coming from, non-highway type roads. It's probably coming from transit too, like buses and things like that use gas. I don't know. It's weird that this was on the table in the first place, but I understand it given the political climate. But there are little things we can do just to rename it that I think could help.
I mean, maybe. I mean, let's be real. Part of this proposal was due to just simple antipathy by the Trump administration against transit in cities. Transit is largely used in Democratic-controlled cities. But part of it was due to, I think, a sort of like diabolical way of addressing a very real fiscal problem, which is that the Highway Trust Fund is borderline insolvent, right? Because as more and more people buy electric cars, and as the real clunkers of the decades past get retired, even like the efficiency of gas-powered engines of cars on the road is getting better. All that means is you're just seeing a decline in the number of gallons of gasoline purchased, which means a decline in revenues going into the Highway Trust Fund, and a growing share of transportation budgets at the federal level that has to come from general revenues, which are supplied just by everybody who's paying taxes. So that, I think, was part of what triggered Trump to suggest this as a way to sort of like, if we don't have to pay for transit, that helps solidify the trust fund. It's at least in a short-term way. Obviously, it's a terrible idea, but that is a real existential challenge, or long-term challenge, I should say, for how we fund transportation in the U.S. and in other countries. Because really, the gas tax pretty much around the world is used to pay for infrastructure, and gasoline consumption in transportation is going down, hopefully permanently,
Well, you speak to a couple of problems there, and you're right on target. I mean, the gas tax, we haven't raised it since 1993.
That's right.
And we don't increase it for inflation like a lot of other countries do.
That's right.
And then beyond that, we're hopefully moving towards a future where fewer of our type vehicles are using gasoline. So it's not even, we're getting to a point where people aren't paying their own way, so to speak. And I don't know, so there's a few problems there. This could be a whole nother discussion about the future of transportation funding, which we should probably save for a different episode. But there's something needed there. And even when I look at the numbers, I think only like 15% of the money goes towards transit. So, I mean, it's still a significant amount of money, but it's, still a small percentage.
I think that's right. And I would be very interested to have that conversation about the future of transportation funding, because it's extremely important. And with great change comes great opportunities. We're going to have to change how we pay for transportation one way or the other in the United States as well as in other countries. And, when you change where the money is coming from, that sometimes gives you a chance to think about differently where the money is going to. And I know you and I think, see largely eye to eye that too much money goes toward highway expansions that are, sort of part of a futile quest to banish congestion, which is never going to work.
Yeah.
So there may be ways to just rethink how we're spending money. This is something that Transportation for America, an advocacy group in Washington, has been pushing for a long time. So yeah, we should come back to that, I think.
By the way, some of the quotes in the article on this made me laugh because a lot of the political ones are pretty, tame, but they're like, where do these harebrained ideas come from? Like stuff like that was in there.
Right.
So, yeah, people have, it was nice to see people have such a strong reaction to even the thinking that this would be on the table.
You mean like some of the congressional representatives?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, not just the transit advocates and such, but even on Capitol Hill, that people are like, what? Like, you can't do this. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was. You don't have that story? I don't have that story in front of me right now. But Sam Graves, who is the chair and a Republican, was like, "This is a terrible idea." You can go. I think we'll put the article in the show notes.
Yeah, we can do that.
But I think you're right. It was surprisingly strong language, which in some way, by the way, this is not because I think that Republicans are, they want to reduce emissions by supporting trans or anything like that. What I think a lot of it is self-interest. I mean, even in a Republican, largely rural district, a lot of those representatives love to go to the ribbon cutting for the new buses that just got delivered, thanks to, those transit dollars through the FTA. So, I think that there's actually remarkably strong support for transit funding that goes across both parties within Congress, and that's encouraging. But what I will say, maybe my last point on this, is seeing Trump basically suggest killing all transit funding did make me think back to a couple months ago when I was at this big APTA conference and the annual meeting. This is APTA is the Association of Public Transportation Agencies across North America, where I heard people say over and over, like, you know what, we actually got lucky because with Trump, it could have been much worse. We've got a strong leader at the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, and Molinaro from New York. They actually generally going to leave things alone. It's going to be it could be much, much worse. And now I look at this proposal from the White House to literally eliminate all transit funding, and I'm like, could it really be that much worse?
David in the chat just mentioned that we shouldn't be that surprised because this was part of the Project 2025 blueprint.
Totally. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think like whenever possible, sort of assume take the Trump administration at its word and don't give them the benefit of the doubt. I think back on some of those conversations in September with some of my transit friends, and I think they were a little overly optimistic about the hand that Trump has dealt transit with the FTA and whatnot.
All right, let's move on to the next topic. So roundabout is the theme. We're going to go back and forth on some topics. My topic, I'll start much more simply than I did last week, because last week I started with a monologue on Back to the Future.
You have another movie from the 80s? Maybe like The Big Chill? Or...
I would love to hear your 2 minutes on The Karate Kid, because you did mention that was your favorite movie for that time period.
I know. And there's a car that breaks down in it, so we need to talk about automotive maintenance, which is getting more expensive. Anyway, sorry, go ahead, back to you.
Well, Mr. Miyagi himself owned a fleet of vehicles.
Classic cars. That's right. That's right. Which are not subject, if you import them, they're not subject to federal motor vehicle safety standards because they are older than 25 years old. So they are legal to import. Sorry, why are we talking? Yeah, you need to cut me off because I will keep going on Karate Kid, which is not helpful.
What I want to start with is...
Back on point. Come on.
What do you think in the realm of transportation when you hear the word access?
Me personally, I mean, I actually know what it means, I think. Do you want me to be naive, or do you want me to actually give you an answer?
Yeah, why don't you start with being naive for the sake of discussion here?
Well, I think the naive answer is people are thinking, oh, you mean like people with disabilities, or Is that what you mean, or do you mean like like roads that are blocked off, like access that way? I think that's the first thing people think of.
Yeah, it is funny, and this is, I mean, I kind of have a pet peeve because in like sort of my research world, like there's so many. I mean, I do research on this too. I mean, people like David Levinson do a ton of research on
Yeah.
access in a way that we mean sort of access to destinations or access to opportunities. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
like we would define it as access is like the ability to reach those destinations and those opportunities. This, jobs or schools or grocery stores or parks or whatever fun is out
Yeah.
there. So we are trying to use that almost as an antonym to mobility because, transportation historically has been about moving cars and measuring sort of how fast that's happening or how much delay there is. So the antithesis would be measuring access. So how easily can people get to jobs and stuff like that? And that sort of gives you a bigger subset of answers. But sort of my problem is like whenever you sort of hear people talking about access, I even have a book with David and Kai Axhausen called Elements of Access, but nobody really knows what we're talking about. Their first thinking is either ADA in the disability context, the degree to which our transportation system's usable by people
Hmm.
of all abilities, including those with disabilities. At the same time, I would say there's a third kind of definition that's more on the conventional engineering side. Like
Mm.
with those, when traffic engineers think about access, they're talking about like driveways, like literally.
Oh, yeah, access roads. Yeah. Hmm.
Well, even if we're thinking about, I might get into the weeds, like functional classification, we have like local roads, collector roads, arterials. The idea is that arterials have less access. We allow usually fewer driveways on arterials, but at the other end of the spectrum, like on local roads, we allow driveways, but it's sort of less car
Hmm.
throughput and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
they're talking about a third thing. So I don't know. I feel like we just need better words to. Like, I'm not sure. Like the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, the access to the
Well,
opportunities. What could that be called? I don't know. Like I don't know where to go with this, but I'm just annoyed that there's this single word is trying to do too much.
well, well. I think maybe it's worth just taking a moment because I think I've done some work on this too. I do think it's sort of challenging for non-specialists as we're sort of wrap their head around why this idea of access matters, which is very important for a lot of, I think, pretty thoughtful transportation academics and planners. And the way I think of access is, and I think I'm paraphrasing Jarrett Walker, the transit consultant, when I say this, is it's the ease with which you can reach the places you want to get to. And so that means reliability, it means time, it means stress. And access is often presented in opposition to mobility, as I think you mentioned. But I think, frankly, I don't know if this is exactly what the official definition of mobility is. But when I'm trying to think about this just intuitively, I think of access as being like how easy it is to get to where you want to go, and mobility is about how fast you are going to get there. And to sort of drive home the point to someone who's not a specialist, I think it's useful to say, just quite simply, like sometimes it's better to be, for a lot of people, it's preferable to be able to travel to a grocery store that is 1 mile away, but you can only go 15 miles per hour to get there, than it would be to go to a grocery store that is 10 miles away and you can go 50 miles an hour to get there, because you actually can get to that closer grocery store faster than, even though you're going slower, than you would the more distant one that allows for you to go faster. This may feel wonky, but it kind of upends the whole framework of a lot of traffic engineering, I think, which is all built around enhancing speed. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's totally fair. I mean, I use it often in a way to, because a lot of times we're trying to figure out, like you said earlier today, I mean, we're trying to figure out how to solve congestion. And I'm saying in that case, we're asking the wrong questions. Like we should
Yeah.
be asking how to improve people's access to jobs or opportunities and stuff like that. Like the real goal of transportation is not low congestion. Like the real goal is to get people and goods like to those opportunities. So when you think about it that way, reducing congestion is just one of many things that could improve that. But the subset of answers is now like transit and walking, biking, and changing
and
land
and
use. And
land use. I was just going to say land.
yeah,
This is one great thing about access, is it really underscores the value of density, because when you
right.
have stuff that's close together, trips are are going to be much shorter, which
Right.
means that you don't have to worry so much about their speed because they can be convenient even if you're not going very fast.
Right. So engineers will focus so much on reducing delay between A and B, but when you use this construct, you can change where A and B are located in the first place.
Yeah, that's right.
But I don't think access is really the right word. I don't know what the right word is. And this is actually something I wanted to bring up because I'm curious to see if any listeners would have better suggestions for us and me to use. Like, is it opportunity? Is it, because I use access to destinations, access to opportunities, but can we flip it somehow? I'm not sure what it is, but it could be
Yeah.
something like reachability. I'm not even sure, but we need something
Well,
better.
I'll be curious what responses we get. If you have ideas, please do email us. By the way, I'm going to mention this a couple times probably over the course of the next 20 minutes, but it's lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. And I agree with Wes. I'm curious what answers we get as well. But I think I know this is a wonky topic and some people may have their eyes glazing over trying to follow what we're talking about here. But I mean, Wes, we've talked about this for a long. I think our very first conversation in part was about this after you wrote "Killed by a Traffic Engineer." Like one of the original sins of American transportation is that so much of what we do is just built around banishing congestion, just
Yeah.
trying to let vehicles go faster. And access is it's wonky, but if you actually could build a transportation system to maximize access, you are fundamentally, finally looking beyond simply attacking congestion as the ultimate goal of a transportation network, which is a long overdue rethink.
Totally. And asking those right questions, or I mean, historically, by asking the wrong questions, has led us down the wrong path. So we can actually figure out what we are looking for, like what the real goals are, and ask the
Yeah.
right questions, we're going to get better answers. Like, even if some of our other protocols and procedures I can quibble with, but we'll head in the right direction. All right. I think that's enough on that topic. Like you said, some people's eyes might be glazing over, but I think it's worth talking about because, simple wording is so important. And this is a topic that should be much more well known and understood. But I think because of the problems we have in the verbiage of it, it isn't. So, I mean, that's kind of why I wanted to bring
Well,
it up.
I just want to just salute the versatility of my co-host on this podcast because last week we were talking about a Michael J. Fox movie. And this week we are talking about an academic concept that practically nobody out there has any idea what it is. So I respect it. I respect the variance, Wes, if nothing else.
Yeah, and I will say people seem to prefer to hear me talk about Back to the Future. So the number of views on that are 10 times any other video we put on YouTube, at least.
Oh yeah, no. For those who just before we started recording, Wes was sharing that we have a short video about the Back to the Future monologue he gave last week, which has God knows how many thousands of views. And then we had what I thought was a very thoughtful back and forth about whether to focus on what was it on speed cameras or road redesigns. And like 3 people have watched this short
Oh, it
on
was
YouTube.
one. It was one. A single view on that.
And you know what? I appreciate that person. I just
Whoever
want to make
that
that
is.
clear. Thank you, YouTube viewer X.
All right. Your
all right.
turn on roundabout.
My turn on roundabout. So I want to go in a different direction. I want to talk about Europe. We've talked a lot about the US in today's episode, but I've been to Europe a lot this year. Just got back from 2.5 weeks in Portugal, the Czech Republic, and Spain. But I've actually been in like 9 countries this year, 4 different trips to Europe for almost all of them for work. Actually, they all at least partly involve work. And I've tried to talk to locals when I'm doing it, and at conferences. Like I gave a keynote at the Smart City Expo in Barcelona with lots of mobility folks running around. And it's interesting because I sort of, with what's happening in the US, I really look to Europe as sort of like a model. Like, okay, we may be having problems trying to maintain the sort of momentum around, cleaner, safer, more city-friendly transportation, but surely Europe can provide inspiration when we are hitting roadblocks. And it's interesting because I think Europe is facing some real backlash of the kind that we're actually seeing in North America too, in places like Houston and Toronto. And what I mean by that is, or a bunch of things. Like, I don't remember if we talked before on the podcast about, the time I spent in Bologna, Italy, where, did we talk about this? Do you remember?
I don't think
I,
so. Keep going.
um, no, I wrote a story about it in City Lab about how Bologna was the first Italian city to adopt a citywide 30-kilometer speed limit, and Giorgia Meloni's government, which is conservative government, very conservative government in Italy, sort of made it a priority, a national priority to end that policy. Looks like you're pointing like I did talk
What
about this
was this
before.
was the area that you said was much more conservative than other parts of the
No,
country?
Bologna is no. That's a different. That's something
Okay, that's a
else.
different. Okay.
No. Bologna is actually a very progressive Italian city.
Okay.
So that's become like a national issue. In fact, actually, Meloni's party just is hosting an entire rally in Rome, basically saying against useless bike lanes. So I just wrote down the phrase. It's in Italian. There's actually, this is Wild West. There's a party in the Czech Republic that's now part of the national government called Motorists for Themselves.
Oh my God.
Literally, motorists for themselves. Part of their platform, eliminating all bike lanes. They want to basically get rid of all of the EV mandates from Brussels. It's wild, but taking it, that's a bit of maybe a little bit extreme. But they're going to be running the environmental ministry in the Czech Republic, and meanwhile, there's cities like Valladolid in Spain and Berlin where there's been some backsliding, where the urbanist reforms put in place a couple of years ago with car-free streets or bike lanes, what have you, have been undone by new government. So it's interesting. I've been talking. Part of why I want to bring this up is I'm trying to learn more about it, and I know we have a lot of listeners in Europe. And if you have thoughts, please do let me know. Let Wes and me know. But what my understanding is from talking with lots of folks in Europe is that there really is a continental trend that's due to sort of a conflation of several things at once. One is really a sense of economic fear because of the tariffs from the US, because of China being hyper competitive around electric vehicles. And I think also the concern of what Russia may do with regarding the energy sector, so that this idea of competitiveness, particularly in the car-oriented countries like Germany and the Czech Republic, has led to this rally around the automobile sort of mentality, which has been problematic. But I don't think that's all it is. I think that there's also just been a sort of backlash against the EV mandates from Brussels, which I think we've seen maybe here in the US too, but not quite the way they have in Europe, where the populist parties have basically latched on to the EU's commitment to phase out gas-powered cars by 2035. And then that has also sort of like involved saying, and also we should not only do that, we should make sure we don't further restrict our precious gas cars in central cities. So in that, I think if nothing else, all this, the concerns about Trump and the concerns about the economy, and also frankly the concerns about immigration, have just crowded out concerns about climate or pedestrian or quality of life in urban areas, the sort of motivations that led to a lot of the wonderful urbanist reforms in Europe the last decade. So I'm a little bit sad about this, and there's still some positive stories, to be clear. Paris is great. Helsinki went a year without any crash deaths at all recently. But it does feel like, it's not just North America that's facing a real backlash right now. It feels like it's happening in Europe too. So, I mean, I know you follow what's happening in Europe as well, Wes. But I guess I'm curious if you have any reactions or thoughts about it, because I've got some hypotheses, but I have a lot more questions too.
It's hard. I mean, it feels you could point to a lot of things like you're saying. At some level too, it feels like they've made so much progress over the last 10, let's say, years, that there's bound to be sort of a pendulum type effect where
Yeah, that makes sense.
it's going to go back the other way a little bit. So I'm curious, like, are they really going backwards, or have things just slowed down to some extent?
I think it's both. I think there have been some real deletion of bike lanes or opening of pedestrian free areas, like I was mentioning a moment
Yeah.
ago. But at the same time too, like when you have a party in power like Motorists for Themselves, which I can't say with a straight face, in the Czech Republic, like they're not going to go along with progress. Like I met when I was in Prague recently, I met with some local leaders in the city of Prague that were talking about wanting to introduce congestion pricing, but they're like, it's not happening right now, given where the government is. So, it's hard to make progress when you've got populists or populist fears ascendant in European governments.
Yeah, that rally against the useless bike lanes, like they literally used like useless bike lanes. That made me laugh a little bit. I was trying to even think about what how do you define what a useless bike lane is? Like, I guess you could do with like the MUTCD warrants, but like to
I don't think
me,
they were doing that. I don't think Maloney's government was doing that in Italy, Wes. I'm
yeah, I
sorry.
mean, I would say like if there's like one kid that wants to use your bike lane, it's not a useless bike lane. Like that's enough. Like, but they're
No.
obviously not. It's not about that. Like this is something that's different. This is just more. It's a political war as opposed to actually about what's best for the transportation.
Yeah, I think. I think that. Maloney is a special case a bit because there's a
Yeah.
far right lunatic, in my view, named Matteo Salvini, who is in charge of the transportation ministry because he's an ally of Maloney. He's literally like, to fight to really because of he hates Bologna so much. He has passed a national law to make it impossible to use automatic speed enforcement on roads that are slower than 50 kilometers per hour, if I remember correctly. Like he's really gone out of his way to get in the way of safe street work. I think part of this has become, it's like street safety has become sort of like symbolic in some ways of like the woke left in Europe to a degree, which is, I think you see parts of that in America too, like where you have the Texas GOP platform officially, opposed to road diets, which seems insane. Like street safety shouldn't be partisan, and yet it seems like increasingly it is.
So I would imagine you talk to a lot of people that are against like this pushback. Like, did they have a plan? Like, what are they trying to do to combat it?
I haven't seen a coordinated effort yet. I think they're just trying to hang on for dear life and win some national elections. Like the race in Portugal, I was hearing about how the far right is ascendant there too. It's really across Europe, and I don't want to pretend that transportation is the reason for it. I think immigration and affordability seem like they're much bigger trends, but I do worry that the automobile has sort of gotten like lumped in with these other causes that the right is sort of advancing in Europe. It's unfortunate, but I'm hearing more concerns than I am solutions when I talk to my
Yeah.
European friends and
Yeah,
contacts.
it reminds me of like some of the things you hear about California, like the same arguments you hear about how they've been pushing to phase out gas vehicles by whatever year, and there's been things in the past how they were sort of ahead of the curve on things like that, and sort of pushing us to do things nationally. But there's also pushback, like you hear businesses saying people can't afford, we're going to move to Texas or whatever. But it seems like this is happening in a similar way in Europe. So I don't know. Like, how do you?
It's tough. I mean, I'm wrestling. I've written a lot about Europe this year because I've
Yeah.
just been there a lot. I've been thinking about it. I did just a few days ago write a story about a sort of a happy story or a positive story about one of the most conservative regions of France, where I happened to be in August, the French Riviera. We did a recording when I was there. So cities like Nice and Cannes and Antibes. That's a very right of center part of France, and yet it's actually a place or a region where the cities they're led by conservative leaders who are happy to restrict cars and have been doing so, and installing bike lanes and creating pedestrian free areas. So I wrote a story about why that is, looking for lessons that might be useful for people elsewhere who want to see ways of sort of supporting urbanism in a bipartisan way. And what's resonated in the south of France is really economic development in large part. The idea being that if you want to attract tourists and compete with other Mediterranean cities, you have to create pleasant places to be and stay. An urban planner I was meeting with, said nobody wants to buy a coffee and sit at a parking lot. So I thought that actually made a lot of sense. And it's interesting, in the course of doing that story, I looked at the tourism pages of states like Florida and Oklahoma that are very Republican, and they feature like how walkable and lively urban neighborhoods are in their states. So maybe that's a pitch that's worth emphasizing more.
That urban planner is right. Nobody does want to do that. Hey, I also have heard a lot of people in American cities say they feel like they're going backwards, like not just Houston. And when I go there, I think one thing I do notice is that, it's a lot of the things we were doing a few years ago, like the flex posts, and they kind of have been run down a little. They look kind of brown and crappy now. So it feels like they haven't been sort of maintained as well as they could. Sometimes it feels like we're going backwards, but I would just sometimes say we're not kind of going forward as quickly as we were before, or maybe as quickly as we want to. We're not actually going backwards in a lot of places.
Yeah, I mean, you can point to some backsliding here and there. Houston is really bad. Toronto is really bad. But in general, it feels like we're just not advancing quite as fast. At least in the U.S., there's some obvious reasons for that based on who's in power in Washington. But
the money too, yeah.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think that it's not like we're losing all of the gains of the last 15 years, and I think it's important to keep that in mind when things feel dark.
Yeah, a quick question before we get to the actual question. But somebody asked, do you think Europeans are envious of our car infrastructure?
If so, they haven't told me that. Envious of our car infrastructure. I don't feel like I'm in the. That's an interesting one. If you're in Europe and you're listening to this, send us a note and let me know. Let Wes know, because
if you go to South American
argue that
countries or African countries, I mean, they all look at a place like Los Angeles as like what they're after. Like that is their goal. Like they.
But part of that's wealth. Part of that's aspirational wealth.
It is, but that's the thinking. But the thinking is like those two things go hand in hand. I'm sure this is not by everybody in those countries. Like
I think it's important to distinguish here. I think it's very hard and very important, but very hard to get people in, say, India to not associate owning an automobile with having made it financially, or Africa, same thing. That's really important, though, to sort of untether the automobile from this association with wealth. But in Europe, I think that it's a bit of a different ballgame there. There's so many people who have plenty of money and take the train and ride transit all the time. So in terms of being envious of our roads, I don't know. I've driven a lot in Europe and the roads are pretty good.
All right. Fair enough. All right. Let's move on to the mailbag. You said you had a reader question for us.
I have one. Maybe it'd be a short and sweet one, but I thought it was an interesting one. It was from Matthew. And he emailed us asking if there are examples of toll highways that issue fines for drivers who speed based on the calculation of time entering and exiting the toll road. Obviously, you can use the time that it takes for a car to basically traverse a given distance to figure out what their average speed was. And you could theoretically issue a fine based on that. I looked at a little bit of research into this because I thought it was a good question, but I'll put you on the spot first and see if you already know off the top of your head.
I do. I guess going back in time a little bit, like they talked about doing this on the Mass Pike. So when Massachusetts first started they called it the Fast Lane Pass, but they eventually combined with Easy Pass. They talked about doing this at the various tolls. So like if you get to Worcester, then you're going to have to pay your
Sorry,
toll.
You get to where? Say that again.
Worcester.
No. I enjoyed the Boston accent. Go back to that.
Welcome to Worcester.
That's good. All right. If you get to Worcester, yeah.
But people lost their ever-loving minds at just the discussion of that. So that never came to be. But I will say, when I was in Australia for my sabbatical, I saw that on the highways. Like there was one instance where I was, the last couple of months there, we did rent a car and try to go up and down the coast a little bit. And I was on one highway and, I was maybe going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, where in the U.S. you'd be probably the slowest car on the highway. Over there, I was passing everybody. And I'm like, what's happening? Like, this is weird. Then I noticed that that's exactly what's happening. Is they take your picture at point one, like 20 miles later, they take your picture again. And I think I found out if you're averaging more than 2 miles an hour or 2 kilometers per hour over the speed limit, you get a ticket in the mail. And this is a real legitimate ticket. That'll be like $500. That'll be points on your license. So this is by no means everywhere in Australia. This is just one
Hmm.
I learned later it's just a couple individual stretches that are doing this, but it worked.
It's interesting. Um, when I was looking online a bit, because I thought Matthew's question was interesting, I wasn't finding great examples of toll roads in the US that actually issue fines this way. But at least in previous years, I don't know if it's still the case, Easy Pass did actually monitor how fast you were going through the toll zone. And if you were apparently speeding, they wouldn't issue a ticket, but they might suspend or cancel your Easy Pass membership, which is
So, but
a
that
penalty form.
is only when you're sort of going through the toll booth area, right?
Yes,
Okay.
the idea is that you're if you don't have Easy Pass, then you can't access some roads at all, and you have to sort of go through the hassle then of paying with cash or credit card, right? Otherwise, so it's a bit of a penalty. That's a disincentive against
Right.
speeding. But I don't see many instances where I couldn't really find a clear one anywhere where a toll authority in the U.S. actually issues a fine based on speeding this way.
And I did not know this question beforehand, but I thought I had heard Connecticut passed a law where they could start doing this, but I don't know if they have. I think I heard that last summer, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure. But
Well, I
yeah,
don't know. Somebody may know the answer. And again, feel free to email us,
yeah.
lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. But it's a good question that Matthew's asking. It's funny. I saw a few people online or a few articles saying, oh, well, you can't really issue tickets this way because you don't actually know who was driving the car that's speeding. And I'm like, well, I don't know. We do that anyway with automatic speed cameras in
Yeah.
cities. So it doesn't feel like it's a legitimate reason not to. So good question, Matthew. At least give you hopefully some food for thought. And if we get a definitive answer from our listeners, maybe we'll come back to it.
All right, so we're up to rail drinks. Do you have a drink with you tonight?
I do. For our 10th episode, I thought I would open up a bottle that I got in the Czech Republic, where I was learning about motorists for themselves. This is it's called Vishnovica. This is sour cherry brandy, which I've had before and I really like. I studied abroad in the Czech Republic, so
No.
I can say some Czech words without sounding like a total gringo. Vishnovica, and I'm very excited to have my first sip of it. How about you? Did you get some sort of I don't know, like Walmart version of
No.
Pinot Noir or something?
I actually went down a sour path as well, but it's a beer. It's
Oh,
Dogfish Head.
nice.
The Sequench Ale. It's like a
Oh, I like
lime
Sequench.
and
Yeah,
salt.
that's good.
This is actually one of my favorite beers to have after like a hot, sweaty bike ride. Like after I'm done with that and I'm gonna sit down and have a beer, this really is my favorite. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm a big sour beer fan. I can't even make fun of you. I can make fun of you last week for your, like Costco Scotch, whatever the hell that was. But this is actually just a good pick.
no, like 10 years ago, I remember being out with a professor friend of mine and he introduced me to a sour beer. And my first sip, I was like, oh my God, what the hell's happening? Like, do they make this on purpose? Like, what is this? And over time, like, it's become sort of one of my favorite categories of beer. Like, I
It's mine
crave
too.
sort of the
No,
sour beers.
I hate it when you actually make a good selection for your alcohol because I really can't make fun of you at all, and I really prefer to do that. But anyway, cheers, or
All right,
as they say
cheers.
in the Czech Republic, na zdraví.
And I'd like to say cheers to Jimmy D'Angeli. He got an email, a really nice email from him yesterday saying that he doesn't, I think he said he's now 77 years old, so he stays away from the hard alcohol, but he's been enjoying the podcast and he does have a non-alcoholic drink with us when we do this. So
Aw,
I appreciate that. He also knew like a lot of the older engineers I mentioned in the book. He knew a lot of them personally. So that was really interesting as well.
maybe you triggered him as well when you talked about John Forrester, which I shouldn't even bring up because now you're going to rant again for half an
Nope,
hour.
nope, nope.
Not
I
going
think.
there. Wow, self control. I like it.
All right.
Um,
When will we be back?
We will be back live on December 4th at 6 o'clock Eastern, if you want to mark that down after Thanksgiving. So that's 2 weeks from today. And hope to see you there. In the meantime, please do feel free to get in touch with your questions. We're always open to that. But I also want to say, now that we've done 10 episodes, I think Wes and I are trying to think about some fun, creative things we might do for for the next 10. So if you have ideas, we'd love to hear them. Lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. And you can also reach me personally through my website, which is davidzipper.com. Wes, you can hunt for it, but he doesn't like to give these things out unless he's changed his mind. Wes, have you changed your approach to this?
I get enough emails already, to be honest. So it is nice to get one like the one I got from Jimmy yesterday. But
you can never get too many emails. I love getting emails. Send me more emails.
If I only did emails, if I did all my emails, I'd never get any real work done. So it's hard.
And we will be distributing this recording as a podcast, an audio-only podcast, very shortly. Please do leave a rating, tell a friend about it. We're always grateful to hear from new people who are listening to it. And without further ado, I guess I'll just say happy Thanksgiving, Wes, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone who's listening to the pod.
All right, you too, man. See you next time.